Hey there, everyone. It's Gigi Sober Sun. July 11th. We in Alcoholics Anonymous do not try to chart the path for the human soul or try to lay out a blueprint of the working of faith, as one might plan a charity drive. We do tell the newcomer that we have renewed our faith in a higher power. In the telling, our faith is further renewed. We believe that faith is always close at hand, waiting for those who will listen to the heartbeat of the Spirit. We believe there is a force for good in the universe, and that if we link up with this force, we are carried onward to a new life. Am I in this stream of goodness? Yeah. Especially among men, and I've talked about this in my men's group from time to time. We were going through a sort of a book study for men, and we tend to want the formula. Just give me the formula. I'll apply the formula, and then I'll be happy, kind of thing. And it's not. I see. If we could rely on the formula, then we wouldn't need God. We wouldn't need the relationship with God. And I think that's kind of what it's talking about. We don't try to chart the path for the human soul or try to lay out a blueprint of the working of faith. And for me, for a while, we got loud fighter jets. For me, for a while, I didn't get on my knees in the morning to pray, because to me that felt a little too pious. And it was kind of also a hangover, really, from when I was mad at God for, quote unquote, taking my dad from me. And really, my dad drank himself to death. And it just coincided with when I was probably the first time I was super, super close with God. And it felt like God drew me near only to sort of slap me down. And that's not what was happening. That's just how I perceived it. And I had at that time, I clearly still had a gotcha God. I still had a do good, get good, do bad, get bad God. And neither of those are workable for any sustained amount of time. And it's not workable for reality. You know, the storms of life will come. If you don't have a clear relationship with God, you're either going to dive down and get closer. And I just became shy of God for a while. You know, it's like once bitten, twice shy. I felt bitten. That was like 1998 was probably the worst year of my life. I had never been to a funeral until that year. I was in my sixth year of sobriety. I wasn't going to AA meetings at all. I was just going to a non-denominational Pentecostal church. It was pretty political. Had some amazing praise and worship, but the doctrine was sketchy. You know, it was do good, get good, do bad, get bad. And woe to you kind of stuff, you know. But I had thought that I had graduated from the simple program, you know, the spiritual kindergarten. I think Bill Wilson was quoted as saying that AA is a spiritual kindergarten. Which is funny. I thought, well, at least I graduated at first grade or something. I don't know. And I really had a dismissive attitude. And to me, now, in you know, hindsight being as it is 2020, if not better, I can see that it was the disease faking me out without taking a drink. Now, I go to church now. I still go to church, and I'm heavily involved in my church, but I know that I cannot, that I've proven time and time again that God wants me in AA. For whatever reason, I know there's plenty of reasons, but it's like, it's where God can use me the most, really. And I'm grateful for it, and I'm in community, and I can still bring my joyous self to an AA meeting, you know. But and yeah, people may roll their eyes at how full of the Spirit I am, and I've had plenty of that too. It was like, you know, my buddy Mike tells me on the regular, I wasn't too sure about you, man. You seem happy all the time. And I'm just like, okay, well, you know. And he always seemed a little leery of me. It's all good. We're good buds now. But, you know, and also I can be vulnerable, more vulnerable in AA than I can be just about anywhere, really. Definitely 12-step recovery offers that opportunity to be vulnerable that you don't get in many other places at all, ever. And so that's great. That's wonderful. You know, why would I want anything different? But again, in AA, you will find religious people that don't go to church, but they're religious about AA and their particular formula of working the program. They can be dogmatic about what we need to do in AA, right? And there is a certain formula to it that has worked for plenty of other people. But it's really, and I say this all the time, that if it wasn't for the relationships, I wouldn't have known about the formula. I formed bonds in the relationships with the people in the rooms way before I knew really what the steps were all about. My early meetings didn't even have the steps on the wall, and they were more like topic discussions meetings than they were about how to work the steps or anything like that. And so it's and even as my concept of a higher power developed over time, I know, and I've said it before in the rooms because I heard somebody else say it and I thought it was cool. I work this program to the best of my ability every day. And that is bullcrap. You know, it's my relationship with my higher power, my connection to my higher power. And he, I choose to call him he, my God, he, you know, takes the crummy bricks of a program that I have worked and makes it into something beautiful. because we can only do what we can comprehend, and that takes time. Sometimes we get poofed. My buddy Barb says, God's not going to poof you. Well, God can poof us. Right? But more often than not, God takes us through the process so we appreciate the process and that we can show that process to other people. But mainly, you know, we learn through educational variety that of spiritual growth, but there is a formula, but we don't try to act like we've got the answer. Even Bill Wilson, or in the big book, it says we know only a little about alcoholism, even though we've helped millions since the inception of AA. We know only a little, and that's humility. And here is what we did. Not, you need to do this. Step one is, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives have become unmanageable. This is what we did. You're welcome to it. They're not saying, hey, newcomer, you need to admit you're powerless over alcohol and that your life is unmanageable. It's a different tack altogether. And I love it. I love that humility. It just cracks me up in a wonderful way. Meditation for the day. God will protect you from the forces of evil if you rely on Him, if you will rely on Him. That's probably, if God chooses to protect me, even if I don't, quote unquote, rely on Him, He will. I will be protected. God is sovereign. God can choose to protect me or not. But I know that it's working out for my good. So again, it's not a give and take. It's not a if-then type thing. It's God's choice. I'm better off if I rely on Him, no matter what. I get under the umbrella of God's protection. Then I'm much safer, much better off, and I'm much more likely to learn from any mistakes of will that I insert into my own life. You can face all things through the power of God, which strengthens you. I agree with that. Once God has set on you His stamp and seal of ownership, all His strength will serve and protect you. Remember that you are a child of the Father. Realize that the Father's help is always ready and available to all His children so that they can face anything. God will do all that is necessary for your spiritual well-being if you will let Him live His way. That sounds kind of awkward, clunky. Who cares whether I let Him do anything except rule and reign in my life? He doesn't care whether I let Him. Actually, He does. I think that when I assert my will to conform my will to His will, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done, as it says in the big book. Then I think my relationship with Him is better. I don't want to say He's pleased with me, because that can become very subjective to the individual. I remember seeing the movie, I think it was, I can't remember what it was now. But anyway, it was about the Crusades. And like these crusaders are on their horse and they see this town, this city or whatever, and one of the guys says, shall we go raid it or whatever, for God? And then somebody else says, it seemed like somebody else had to say was, God wills it. And as soon as somebody said God wills it, everybody said God wills it, God wills it, and just chimes in and says the same thing. And then they go down and they murder and pillage the village in God's name. It's kind of like, God is pleased with me because I did it in his name. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. You make sure, through careful consideration in most cases, that what you're doing is the right thing to do, is what God wants, and it is what God wills. And a lot of times God will say, wait, just wait, But as long as we are pausing when agitated, as it says in the book, asking for the next, his guidance and direction on a moment by moment basis, the book says it will gradually become a working part of the mind. And so we keep going with that, It says, if we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. So it definitely is. Where is it here? Yeah, I'm not finding it handily, but I believe it's the 7th step, where it says we're liable to make all kinds of mistakes, but as long as we're seeking to do his will in our lives, that's where we get out of self. That's the avenue to get out of self and to be of service to others. So, prayer for the day. I pray that I may rely on God as I go through this day. I pray that I may feel deeply secure no matter what happens to me. Oh, that's good. Feel deeply secure. And to know that God is in control, especially with, the fear porn that happens on TV these days. Fear and outrage porn in the 24-hour news cycle, can make you think that the world is falling apart and make you feel like God is pacing the heavens, wringing his hands, kind of screaming like, what are you doing? I gave you paradise. I love the image of God sitting on his throne and the sea around him is like glass. He's at perfect peace no matter what happens in the world, because he works it all to his good and our good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And I believe that anybody that gets into recovery and seeks seeks to walk with their chin up, chooses to aim up, will, with God's help, rise up. And we all are called according to his purpose. Thank y'all. I love you. Look up. Aim up. Rise up.